Hello and welcome. It is your weekly program that has always been concerned with the virtual gathering. That is the gathering that occurs on air and online. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, thanks for your time. A very warm welcome to our viewers around the world, those of you who are following us via the World Wide Web. This week I begin on a thankful note. Tony Uncle C.J. Marshall of C2 radio station 90.1, whose interest in community life, Barbadian history and heritage is demonstrated weekly in his radio program when he makes My Community a point of discussion on his radio show. Thank you, Tony. In last week's program, we concluded our journey throughout the parish of Christchurch. And in keeping with the National We Gathering theme 2020, we have entered the 11th parish of Barbados to give the residents of this parish an opportunity to take pride in showcasing their various communities.
As a young boy growing up in the Bellaire, these areas were like playgrounds for me. I remember when I was a boy coming from Sunday school, I used to go to St. Paul's Church. We would come here in the Esplanade, and right where all those trees and there was nothing there. It was just water, about 3 to 4 feet from the edge of the concrete to the surface of the water. Water was about 5 to 6 feet deep. There was no beach in this area, and we knew lower down where the people bathe now, we used to call it Brown Beach. It got the name because of the color of the water. The Barbados Ice Company, which we know as BICO, they had their plant just below where the new car park is, on that open ground. And all the water around that area was brown. And people used to call it Brown Beach. Hence, it stuck with us, Brown Beach. But all here where we are standing now was deep water. And this area was used, the gazebo was used mostly for a program they used to call Bajan Bandstand. A lot of our early entertainers cut their teeth here. Tony Grisette, the Merry Boys. The police band used to play here, I think it was once a month. Or either the first or the last Saturday, I can't remember. In each month, there would be some sort of activity in this gazebo. And as a boy, I never used to like a lot of those activities, but I would come once in a while and listen to the police band. And then after I joined a band, at a very early age, I was in a little band. We used to make a lot of fun in the hotels and get paid for it. At Edgewater, playing in a band, we used to call the band the Mystics. We call ourselves the Mystics for some reason, I don't know why. But we used to play at Edgewater every Thursday or Friday night. We used to play with another band. We would play for the first 2.5 hours or 3 hours, then the other band would take over and we would go. We were the younger out of the two, so we played first. And then the more matured band would come for the people who are coming in late. We were just there for those who were dining or having a light drink. So because we were young, they didn't want to put us in the heavy part of the entertainment. And it's after I joined Yoruba Foundation with Elambe and I got very involved in the band, you know. After I got involved very deeply then with Yoruba, I gave up the band for the drumming and the dancing at Yoruba. Yes, I was a dancer, represented Barbados in Cuba for Carifesta in 1979. Then we went to New York in November, December. It was part of our independence celebration activities that went over into New York. And I was on that as well. That was under the Barbados Labour Party with the late Tom Adams. And there were groups like Funkel and the Funkertiers, and that was after Spooge was going out, because in the days of Spooge, when Spooge ruled the Caribbean, the Bajan Bandstand it would get a lot of Spooge music. But then funk came in and everybody was funk. They had a guy called Funkel the Funkertiers, they had Funkin' Ricky, Funkin' Eddie, and everybody was funking up the place. As a Calypsonian later wrote.
Oh yes, we do recall that. It was Calypsonian Lord Realtor who wrote Radio Station in protest of the funk music that was being played on our local radio stations, not only in Barbados but throughout the Caribbean region. Let us step back inland and learn about activities around his place of residence.
In the Bellaire of itself was a nice place. You know, we had 2 baker shops in the area I live. I lived in Jessamine Avenue at the time. And we had Lynch's Baker Shop, which is, if you go out to the area, it is looking over Leiders Park. And then about 3 or 4 buildings below was another baker shop run by a guy called Don. Actually, 2 different people ran it. One was, I know him as Donald. As a matter of fact, he told us to call him Donald. And he was good with turnovers. Miss Lynch, her favorite bread for us was something called a cut drop. It is something like a pone, but more like a lunch cake texture, but it was a sort of a pone. And in those days, they never sold the edges of cupcakes. They would trim it, and we would go and buy the trimmings. A penny in trimmings, and a cream soda Martiniu. And as boys, that was a good lunch. Best baker shop we had in those days was Humphreys. It was now, because Humphreys is not there anymore. And in those days, a lime kiln was directly behind Humphrey. We used to call it rather lime kiln. You know, in those days, lime kilns were very, very popular because it was used as like a wash. You use it on the, government used to use it on the standpipes to wash the pipes in white. People used to buy it to wash their sinks the outside sinks at home and around the outhouse. The toilet used to be outside. Toilet and bath was never attached to a house. It's only in the modern structures that we find it. But we had the pit toilets and they would wash them with the white lime. I remember you used to buy something called unslack lime, which was a stone. You would put it in water and it would bubble, and we would stir it until it get to a smooth paste, and we would then brush the outhouse with it, and all the rocks that made up the ground sill, we would brush them, especially around Christmas time. Everybody wanted white lime because white lime would be sprinkled where you couldn't get sand. You would sprinkle white lime around the house, and we would wash the walls with the ground sill with white lime. But also white lime was good because we used to use it in the chicken runs to keep down the odor, and it also prevented flies. Because now if you have fowls, and common fowls as we used to call them, today people call them chickens, but we call them fowls. And we would have to sprinkle the fowl pen with white lime to keep the flies out and around the pig pen, because flies love carrying. My father kept pigs, so I took care of the pig pens on morning and fowls, cleaned the yard. That was after my brother grew up. I was next in line, so I had to do the yard work on mornings. And it was like a village used to raise us. When my mother go to work and my father's gone to work in the vacation, the neighbors took care of us. We couldn't play the fool. Otherwise, when my mother come home for lunch, because she used to work at the Elite Shirt Factory there in Bay Street, next to the Juicy, it would have been licks. I mean, my mother was good with the wit. My father was more a talker when it comes to discipline. My mother was the king of the wit. And, you know, the boys used to play all sorts of sports. Every evening after school, road tennis. We had a bush that grew in front of us. I can't remember the name, but it is family to the Joseph court. We would pick these leaves and we would draw a court in front of my mother's house, and it was road tennis till outside get dark. On weekends, the same thing. After we did our housework, we used to play, we used to call it kneeling down cricket. And kneeling down cricket may sound funny, but It is one of the toughest forms of cricket because you are kneeling on one knee, the bowler is on one knee. And when you hit a ball, you have to get up, run in the wicket, even though the wicket was very short. But you could get a team being stumped out, actually, for about 5-6 runs because stumping was the quickest thing in kneeling down cricket. You miss the ball, the wicket keeper you have to get the bat back in the crease. So from the time you raise the bat, some wicket keepers were very wicked and witty. They took the ball from in front the stumps and stumped you. And as long as your bat wasn't on the ground, umpire give you out, you know. And it was a lot of fun, a lot of argument sometimes about who was right and who was wrong. But like all sports, you will get these arguments and things. But we used to have a good time, you know. And I used to make knit balls because an elderly guy taught me how to make the knit balls with the crochet cord and a stone and some newspaper and cloth. You wrap it and then you use the crochet cord or what we used to call herringbone. You used to fly kite with it. And we would knit the ball, or not, we would use bicycle strands from the bicycle tire. We would cut the black ones in particular and we would just put it over and over until we get the size ball we want. And that was our cricket. We played our games like all boys. We walked to school and we walked home from school. And like I was telling someone a while ago, we ate food, not fake food. We ate proper potatoes and yams. We never used to eat in those days imported meats. We would go to the market and we would get fresh beef, fresh pork, fresh mutton. And on the weekends, every village had a cry of pigs or sheep. Somebody was killing something. And we had most people didn't have a fridge. So the ice company became very handy because people would buy ice. They would build a box, get a carpenter to build a box. They would fill it with sawdust, bury the ice in the sawdust, and cover it with a couple sheets of crocus bags. And that ice could last for about 3-4 days, depending on how big the block was when you put it in there. And we would put things in there. And as a boy, playing in these general areas, I remember the Barbados Ice Company, Baiko, because every Sunday night when my father took us to church, because he used to go in the night 7 o'clock service, we would stop there to buy ice cream and especially something we used to call eucalyptus drops. When you put a eucalyptus drop in your mouth, your nose ran water, your eyes ran water, and your ears would twinkle because it was very hot, but we loved the heat. After Baiko went to the harbor, Harris Paint started their paint production and distribution from in the same Barbados Ice Company building. That's where Harris Paint actually started. And then above that was the Natural Gas Corporation at the time. It wasn't the National Petroleum Corporation, it was the Natural Gas. Right where the new car park is built now, they had tanks, the natural gas had their tanks right there. I remember the Bear Mansion. They used to produce a chloride liquid for bleach. We used to call it EC. I don't know why EC, but I think EC are the two first letters in the two words, something chloride. And my mother used to send us there to buy this EC. Because in those days, there was no brand name like bleach and Clorox and those type of things. Those names were not known to us. I only knew EC. And we would go right there at the Bear Mansion. You go into the main gate, and right in front of the main gate was a little structure, and they used to make this chloride formula right in there. And that's where we got our bleach. You know, and that's how we live. We live a simple, comfortable, and happy life in those days.
Oh, for a return to those exciting days when our people understood the true sense of community. Let us make our way in a southerly direction and get a sense of what existed there when Hassel was a little boy.
Today we call it Pebbles Beach, but actually it is not the real name of the beach. The area is called Engineers Pier. Pebbles Beach got the name because in those days there was a beach bar and restaurant there. And the name of the restaurant was Pebbles Beach Bar. Pebbles Beach Bar and Restaurant. So by calling Pebbles Beach Bar, people changed the accent from Pebbles Beach Bar to Pebbles Beach, which makes it sound different, you know, and the younger folk came up and hearing Pebbles, Pebbles, Pebbles. Eventually the name stuck to the area, but actually that whole area is called Engineers Pier. And right where the Hilton is built, we used to call that Shot Hall, because the soldiers used to practice with the rifles in that general area. I remember as a little boy going down there and seeing the tall sheets of steel and the sandbanks where they used to shoot at the targets down there. And where on the opposite side, which is the eastern side of the Hilton, where the lighthouse is, that area was called Gravesend because of the military cemetery being in that area. You know, we used to play behind the drill hall. In those days, they had a big hedge. And we would just go down there and go in the coconut trees. Not me, because I was not a good climber, but we would get the coconuts, drink till we are tired, and then bathe with the water. So there was Gravesend, Shot Hall, and we come here, Engineers Pier. We had Burke's Beach. As a matter of fact, Barbados was full of springs. Right here at Burke's Beach, when you was diving, you can actually taste the fresh water. Fresh water would come up into the seawater. You can actually taste the brackish water when you dive through it. And I was told that there had springs as well. And here was no beach. Then we get Brown Beach. And there was about 4 jetties on this area. There was one directly opposite the hospital, the old hospital. We used to call that the hospital jetty because the water, swimming there the water was very deep. But as the construction of people say the Deepwater Harbor, but we later found out it was the fisheries complex, pushed a lot of sand in this area and created now what we have as a very beautiful beach. Every morning, sometimes all day long, we see joggers on the beach, not knowing that all there was water, that if you couldn't swim, you could drown. And then there was the Esso, had a pier there for the fisher folks to come to get their diesel. Then below that was the Harbor Police, which is slightly opposite the Bethel Methodist Church. They had a pier there as well that Lorenzo Bess, he was a police officer. He taught people to swim there. And I think at one time he used to coach the Barbados water polo team. And then below that, I was told by my father that there was another pier where Manning used to bring in their lumber before they had a harbor. And the seine boats would go out and bring in these things, you know. And the development around this area happened in a short time. I mean, not 40 or 50 years. As you can see, I'm a young man. When we have very bad weather, the water used to go into the GIS car park. All in there would be full with water the next day. And in those days, the roads were not as nice as we have now. They were not paved like how these are paved. They were more stony. And the sea, when the sea is rough, the water will come right over into the road. Like I said, at that time, here was a boys' school. The GIS building was called Bay Street Boys' School. And they built that wall that ran right away, right down to where the traffic lights are now, to prevent water from entering the road.
That's what you just saw in the program. Well, it was subsequently removed at a time when we started to recognize the importance of having an open window or vista, as it were, to the sea.
Right at the corner where the Family Planning Association, the back of the Family Planning Association was, there was the Bellaire Jazz Club. Used to always have activity there on Friday and Saturday nights. Bellaire Club had a beautiful balcony that you would sit out there and you would have your drinks while the jazz, it was a jazz club. You know, have a lot of live jazz music. In those days, most music was live. Little bands make a lot of money in the hotel industry and nightclub. Then lower down, below Martin Yu house, was Harry's Nightery. That was well known in those days for entertainment, adult entertainment, they say. But then as they come further up, coming towards the Garrison, we had the Elite Shirt Factory and Juicy. The Juicy factory was right there. And Then we would come up to the Garrison Hill. And all around the Garrison, by where the 4-foot-long pole, was a company called Lexworth Press, a printing company. And we used to play all in those areas as boys. The building on my left, the ministerial building. Yes, when I was a boy, I would go in there to the printing office, and I would get trimmings of the paper. And they were pretty big sizes. Sometimes you get 8.5 by 10, 8.5 by 11, around that size. We used to get offcuts, and I would go home. My father had a metal clamp, and I would put them under that and glue them with white glue and make drawing pads, because I love drawing. Art was one of my, well, I would say, talents, one of my gifts. From a little boy at primary school, I got a lot of money from children just to draw the head of a horse on their book back. Horses was my favorite animal. And living close to the Garrison, I would go and watch the horses exercise on mornings. And as a young boy, I saw all the different postures of a horse while he's running. How I saw it, I don't know, but I can remember how a horse looks when he's galloping, or when he's cantering, or when he's trotting. And I would draw them on these pads that I would make. And the guys would give me money just to draw a horse on their backs. So I made a lot of money from a child just drawing horses. And I took that talent along with me to school. When I was about 17 years old, I sat A-level art at Parkinson. We did technical work along with the regular academic work. So I was into my metal work, woodwork, and art was one of my favorite subjects. And I remember while doing art, it was at that time that the art teacher then, Mr. Grantley Prescott, he designed the Barbados flag. I remember going in the art room and I saw it, but we didn't know what it was or what it was for until we heard that he had won for the flag of Barbados. But then we had a young, energetic, no-nonsense art teacher called Mr. Carl Branch. He said that we are of a standard that we can sit A-level, and he encouraged the then headmaster, Mr. Herman Husbands, to allow him to put us to sit A-level art. And it is said that I was the youngest of all the students that whoever got A-level art at a comprehensive school. They were around 16 years or 17 years when I got it. I remember the very last exhibition they had in Queen's Park that was held in December. I got a special mention for a piece of art that I did, and it again was horses. It was the 1971 St. Leger. I remember who won the race. It was won by a horse called Bellaire, ridden by Challoner Jones. In those days, it was owned by I think Bill Chandler, you know, and I got a special mention for that piece of art. But it was a drawing of the finish of the 1971 St. Leger. And after that, I think after that, we had no more exhibition around Christmas time. The exhibition is now what we know as the farmers' exhibition that they have early in the year. But as a boy then, it was in December, I think it was around Christmas time, that we used to go into the park for the annual exhibition. All in all, the Bellaire was a very peaceful place, you know, very peaceful, loving people. I moved from the Bellaire over 35 years ago, when here was still water. So you can see that this transformation is not even 40 years old yet. It's about 30, 35 years old, from water to sand.
This is Hassel Springer's recollection of Bay Street and surrounding areas. What could be contained in a program of 30 minutes in duration. In a sense, it is just a reference or starting point that should lead to further research on the area. Once again, I encourage our students to advance what was just presented in the form of a research paper or thesis dissertation. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Until next week at the same time, it's goodbye for now.